Hey, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Hanging On to Hope podcast.
I'm Brenda J.
And I'm Karen Wonder.
And we are HangingOnToHope.org.
This podcast is intended as educational and is not psychological or medical advice. Always consult a professional when needed, and we disclaim any liability in connection with the instruction, information, or advice given. Well, hi, everyone. This is Karen W., and on today's podcast, we have Heather Elizabeth. Heather is an advocate and founder of the Facebook group Held and Healed. She's also a fellow podcaster and author of an upcoming book. So I first met Heather in the Give Her Wings victim advocacy training that we did a couple years ago, which was just amazing. I really didn't see her face until I think towards the end of it when we did like a live chat. So we're so glad to have you on the show, Heather.
Yes, we are.
Oh, ladies, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes. Well, if you just want to briefly share whatever you feel led to share about your inspiration to start your Facebook group and to work in advocacy.
So I am an abuse survivor, and while I do not share the details of my story publicly, I can say that through my childhood and my adulthood, I have experienced every form of abuse. I do a lot of educating on the 13 patterns and systems of abuse. So it's so much more than broken bones and bruises, as you know.
Yeah.
And I just, through the Give Her Wings Academy and some other things that happened prior to that, all these light bulbs just started turning on for me. And I realized this was not just for me. This knowledge, this clarity, the validation that I was receiving, it wasn't just about me. It was about countless women that I know and would come to know who needed this information. So I think it was September 12 of 2020 that I stepped out in faith and started a Facebook group just to be a resource filled with resources. And before the end of 2021, we were at 1,100 people. So the need is great. It is called Held and Healed Christian Women Rebuilding After Abuse. And we welcome ladies who are coming out of that and or any lady who is a helper and wants to just know better and do better.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know I see your Facebook posts and they're great because, we just need more and more advocates.
Yeah,
like you said, the need is great.
It is amazing what you do, really.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's so inspiring.
You know, most of the time, it doesn't even feel like much effort. Like it's just, I see a great post or I see a great resource and I just throw it into the group and the discussions start flowing. So It's been just a beautiful thing. And to see women just feeling validated, feeling seen and heard, and just, it's so vital that they feel that someone believes them. So it's been an incredible journey. And I know that there are so many more women out there that we need to reach. So we just keep doing what we're doing.
Absolutely.
Right. Exactly.
And I think, I haven't talked to you before. This is Brenda J. How are you?
Hi.
I guess I never got to tell you who I was. I'm not ever talking to you before, but just your presence on social media to me, it just comes across as this kind, loving, compassionate, wonderful woman. And that's great because you don't usually find an advocate that's not, but that's how you came across to me. And I think it's all true. So,
well, I appreciate that. And it's funny because it's actually been a week of really cleaning up some things and hearing that there are lots of haters out there. And so doesn't understand why you do what you do, meaning why you speak out about abuse. And so warned me about you. And so. So I can feel like everybody out there thinks I'm a you-know-what.
Oh.
But it's not survivors.
Right.
It's not advocates. Survivors and advocates need us to keep speaking and keep sharing. And a lot of times it's the abusers that hate what we're doing.
Right. Of course.
And so I've learned the power of the delete and block button all over again. And those, boundaries are really important. Boundaries are good. And if they're so bothered, I just posted something today. Like, if you're bothered by my post, unfollow me. It's that simple.
Yeah. Like, why are you following if it bothers you so much?
It's that simple. I'm not going to shut up. So if you don't like what I post, then you can unfollow me. I didn't say unfriend me, but if you're reporting back to my abusers, please unfriend me. I don't have time for those games. So it's just funny when someone says kind or calm, because that's not the things I've heard people describe me as for so long.
Wow.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah, that is. That is.
Yeah. One thing I try to help the ladies understand is when someone's coming at you and they are abusive, typically most of the time you can take what they're saying and the exact opposite is what's actual truth.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a sign of an abuser. A lot
Yeah.
of is that projecting.
Today, we're discussing things not to say to a survivor. These are things that are more hurtful than helpful. These are phrases that may blame and shame survivors. These are spoken by spiritual leaders and people with authority over them.
Yeah, so we'll just dive right in. So the first one is you must have sin in your life or you would not be suffering.
Wow, that's a doozy, right? Most of these are just not. I mean, we say out of the gate, a book title that I have brewing in my brain is That's Not God. And so pretty much every single one of these statements we could say afterwards, that's not God. That's not the heart of the Father. That's not the character of the Father. He would not speak that over his daughters. So if that were the case, every single person would be suffering. It's that simple. Like, who is without sin?
Right.
So it's just a mute point. And then we go into the blame is 50-50 or it takes two to tango. Like those two statements together are used to just shame the victim and make her equally responsible. Most of these have either been spoken to me or to the ladies in the group. I kind of did a survey. What are some of the most common things that you've heard spoken over you? And, I want to say too, as a disclaimer, if you've spoken some of these things just because you didn't know that they were hurtful, forgive yourself. And maybe you need to ask someone for forgiveness and then know better, do better. So This is not to condemn. This is not to make people feel bad. This is just so we can do better. When we realize that we've done something that's hurtful, we can do better. So blame is 50-50 is not an accurate statement. It takes two to tango is not an accurate statement when abuse is present.
Right.
It only takes one person to break the marriage covenant. It only takes one person to destroy a relationship.
Right. That's exactly true. We had Bob Hamp on. We haven't released that podcast yet, but his video on really defining the dynamics of abuse was so validating to me. I saw it like 4 years ago when he had it on Facebook, and he really gets into that issue a lot. And I just remember watching it the first time and just crying because it was so validating.
Yeah. And there's also this concept of sin leveling. And I guess my understanding of sin leveling is that it just makes all sin equal. We know that the consequences of different sins are very vast. And I once heard someone say to me that because she had stolen a pen at some point in her life, that she was just as evil as a child rapist. No. No. So we need to be extremely careful when we use phrases like no one's perfect or no church is perfect. A lot of times that is a form of sin leveling. And in God's eyes, there are certain sins that are there is a sin unto death. And he also has a lot to say about anyone who causes his precious children to stumble, something about a millstone around the neck and thrown into the sea.
Yep.
Like that's an incredible example of what God feels towards abusers.
Yeah.
So I really don't think he feels that way about someone who stole a pen from the doctor's office.
No, I don't think so either. Major.
We need to be really, really careful if we're doing that to people and we're telling people that all sin is the same. Not true. Not true at all.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I love that you did a survey. And so these are actual, this is, I love this. So the next one is you are not perfect.
Who is besides Jesus? Like that's the thing is if that was really a point, the only person that ever walked the face of the earth was Jesus Christ, who was perfect. So that would mean Jesus was the only one that didn't deserve to be abused. So I don't think people even think about how ridiculous some of these are. You're not perfect, so you deserve to be spoken to that way. Well, you didn't make him exactly what he wanted for dinner or you burned the toast. So no, he doesn't have the right to mistreat you for any of those reasons.
Yeah. And then take the plank out of your own eye. That's kind of goes with the other ones that we just talked about.
Yeah. Those are all very similar.
And then what did you do to make him abuse you? That kind of goes along with all the two, where it's responsibility on the victim.
Well, and that one is used a lot of times with sexual assault. What were you wearing? What did you do? Did you lead him on? And And something I say that maybe seems absurd to people, but I believe this, is a godly man, a person with self-control, godly or not, a person with self-control should be able to walk by a naked woman and not assault her. Like, I don't know why there would be a naked woman, but we're just talking about the weirdest case possible. Like, you have self-control. You do not have to hurt someone just because they don't have on enough layers of clothing. And that is not a reason to abuse someone. It's just not. Give her a towel to cover up, give her a blanket, get her help, call 911. But that is just ridiculous. But we hear that over and over. What were you wearing? What did you do to make him hurt you? What did you do? And it all comes from that same belief that we have the right to hurt other people. We have the right to have power or control over other people.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the power and control one.
You need to give him more sex.
So this one is given to women often, very often, when there's a disclosure of infidelity, which is, again, most of these are just absolutely, when you think about them logically, they make no sense.
Makes sense to me because my ex had an affair and that's not even the case at all, how that works.
Oh my gosh, especially if there's sexual addiction. So I say, think about someone who's an alcoholic. So you give him more alcohol, or someone who's a drug addict, you give him more drugs. Like, that is not the way that you help an addict. So, and then of course it is shifting all the blame onto her and the responsibility onto her, that if you just gave him sex X amount of times a week, he would not stray. And that's not true.
Yeah,
No,
it's not true at all. I mean, I can vouch for that. That's absolutely not true.
It's not true. And the shame and the guilt that comes with that, the weightiness of that. And then, of course, we talk about the obligation sex message, and it just weighs women down so heavily. And yet this is what I hear women say over and over again, that when there was a disclosure of either porn or a physical affair or multiple or a combination, this is what women are being told over and over again by their spiritual leaders.
Wow.
The 72-hour thing. I mean, you guys have heard that one?
No. Yeah.
My ex told me that one. He's the one that told me.
That was created by, I don't remember who originally started pushing that, but I think it was someone within the faith community. And
I think it was James Dobson had mentioned it or something.
I think I've heard that. And of course it was a man. Of course it was a man.
That wasn't a woman.
And then you think about all the people who are single, or all the people that, are celibate. And it's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous to say that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this next one is a big hot button for me. You need to pray more, because the War Room movie, I know we've heard you talk about that too, but yeah, I saw that. I was already separated when I saw that, but that movie was so hurtful to me, because it just looks like she just prayed to this magic God, and he just, prayed a magic prayer. And then her husband, I think he did illegal activity, and he didn't have any consequences to that. And he just totally changed. And I'm like,
Yeah. I sat just weeping and just stunned through that whole movie. It was, it gutted me. The person that took me, she turned to me and she goes, "Was this hard for you?" I was like, yeah, think.
Yeah, I know. I did the same thing. I went with a fellow divorced woman. We're both just looking at each other like, that didn't happen that way for us. And we prayed.
No, and it didn't. And that's not how prayer works. God does not override the will of anyone. And our prayers are not manipulative things to change the will of other people. That is not how prayer works. And so it's a very dangerous and toxic message. And yeah, it grieved me. It gutted me. And I want nothing to do with that message. I don't ever want to be someone who tells another woman, if you just did X, Y, Z,
right,
he would change. Yeah, that's not.
And I know that their intention of that movie was, prayer is important, which I agree with that. And after that, I saw that movie, because I never used my closet for prayer as much. And I put up things in my closet and verses, so I took away something positive, like, hey, I do need to pray more. And some of the, there was some good suggestions in there, but it was damaging too, because like it implies that, you just pray and God's this magic genie that just does whatever you ask for. And it obviously doesn't work that way, because everyone has a free will and you can't force someone that isn't willing.
Prayer absolutely is powerful, but what it was presented as is not actually prayer. So that's where it gets dangerous. And when we have people that have spiritual authority over, these really Christian celebrity type people that are out there pushing these teachings, like, people are just clinging to it. And a little bit of good mixed in with a lot of bad is dangerous.
Yeah. That's
It's dangerous. So I have just been like, if I went back over the last 20 years, every book I've read, every movie I've watched, every Bible study I've done, I would see it through very different eyes.
Yes, me too.
Yeah. When you become trauma informed and you become abuse informed, it changes. It really changes your lens on everything.
It definitely changes your lens on everything.
Yeah.
The next one is you need to submit more. Submission is weaponized. But before the scripture says, wives, submit to your husband, it says, submit to each other. It is not quoted in context.
That's right. That's right. And there are people who will go down fighting and they will quote verse 22 and they will totally jump over and eliminate verse 21. And again, that's dangerous.
Yeah.
That's so dangerous. So yeah, the word says submit one to another right before it says. And a lot of these early writings did not actually have the breaks that our Bibles have and the divisions, in the text. And so it's just really dangerous. There's one person out there, I'm not going to mention any names, but she will harp on the wives submit. And when I asked her about submit one to another, she said to me, I don't speak to men, I only speak to women. And I said, well, it's extremely dangerous to speak to women the way that you're speaking to them. And then I think I probably got banned from her page. So
it's another sign of not a healthy person.
Yeah, well, it's always a badge of honor when certain people ban you from their page. So it's
Yeah.
In the meantime, maybe someone read that. Maybe someone, saw some truth for a second before it got deleted. So,
yeah, I definitely went through a phase where I've talked about The Excellent Wife and a lot of those books that I sought after that are so toxic now. I wish I would have just burned them just to have that experience of,
right.
I know I threw them away. I didn't take them to Goodwill or anything. So I'm like, I don't want anyone to read these books.
Right.
These are toxic, horrible books that no one should read.
Yeah.
If I had an extra $100 or $200 a month, I would be going to local thrift stores, buying up all the bad books and just destroying them. Gift my sisters in Christ.
Really? Exactly. No
Yeah.
one, just like they're trying to do with Gary Thomas's book. It's like this.
Yeah. I'm like, Jesus, give me more so I can do more, because that's one of the things that's top on my list. So
I get that. So another one is you need to nag less.
Yeah, the scripture about the dripping faucet. And my question is always, why is the faucet dripping? Faucets that drip need to be fixed. So let's go to the core. Let's go to the root. And instead
that's good. I like that.
You know what I'm saying? Because most of us women, we really want peace in our homes, and we want unity, and we want Jesus. I remember someone saying to me, Heather, I just don't understand. He knew when he married you what you wanted. You did not leave anything up for question. You wanted to have a godly marriage, a godly home, and raise children to serve and follow Jesus. There was no question, nothing. It was there, who you are, who you say you are. And yet many would say I was a nag because I wanted those things. And because if something was inappropriate, I would speak up, and that would be considered nagging.
Yeah.
I have very little tolerance for sexually inappropriate jokes. I have very little tolerance for racial, there's just certain things that aren't funny.
Right.
Certain things that are just it is a no tease zone and a no joke zone, and certain topics you just do not make into humor because they're not funny.
Right.
But everybody would say, oh, she's such a nag because she doesn't want somebody to be inappropriate with their language or what they're talking about. And what is the meme that goes around, ladies, there's no need to ask him every 6 months, he'll get to it, or something. That meme, that laughs about women asking too much, but really she's only asking once every 6 months. So
I think in the abuse dynamic, it's not necessarily nagging. My ex would pull that scripture about the worst to be on the rooftop than have a nagging wife. But it's just that the woman they want to have so much control that they don't want you to have a voice at all. So when you actually just even say one sentence, you're a nag. That's how my life was. So that I don't necessarily consider it nagging, just being a person. I wasn't even allowed to be a person. So,
well, it basically was, you need to shut up.
Yes. Yes, you can't say anything at all, or they're going to use the scripture against you.
Yeah, you need to have no voice, and everything that every time you would open your mouth, it would be misconstrued as nagging.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, because they want to turn it around. So that's what they're good at. The next one is boys will be boys.
Well, I am a mother of 3 young men, and I have never, ever allowed that statement in my presence without confronting it. So boys will be boys who will grow up to be men, and we want them to be godly men, and we want them to be faithful husbands, and we want them to be loving fathers. So what we instill in them while they are young, and, yes, they grow up and they make choices, and they may not be the choices that we would make for them. But I know in my heart that when my children were in my care and in my keeping and under my supervision, that there were standards. And I did not let things slide just because of their gender. I cannot stand the double standard.
Right. Right.
I have told my boys since they were littles that if they were disrespectful to a woman in my presence, that I would speak up. And they know that to be true. So
between the three of us, we have 8 boys.
Yeah. I see.
wow.
I have 2, and I got a girl in the middle, but she has 3 boys, and you have 3 boys.
All right, Lord
So
help
we
us.
must our work cut out for us.
We need you, Jesus. We need you.
We need you,
Because
Jesus.
I promise you that at 23, 21, and 21, going back to 3 in diapers, 3 in car seats, and not sleeping through the night was a heck of a lot easier than this.
Yeah, it is harder when they get older.
Yeah.
I don't know why no
this
one
is
tells you any
different.
of that stuff.
Yeah. It's just,
Well, I'm not trying to be like a Debbie Downer. I'm just trying to be a realistic somebody, because you got to save up some energy for the teenage and the early adult years, because it's a battle, especially in the world that we're living in right now.
Yes.
Oh my.
Absolutely.
yeah, we have a lot of conversations because I homeschooled for like 11 or 12 years. And there's things I did because I was legalistic at one point, because you kind of caught up in that culture. And we talked about that with Rebecca Davis some, but there's things I'm like, we just I try to keep that discussion ongoing, because I know there's things I said and did that I feel guilty of still, that like, that was not good. That was not really true.
At the time, we did the best that we could with what we had, and we did not know what we did not know.
Right.
And we believed that sheltering them in certain ways, and we believed that purity culture, there were just certain things that we believed were next to godliness, and we needed to ingrain in our children. And if we had it to do all over again, I think most of us would do some things differently.
Yeah, definitely.
But I do believe that my boys, and I'm going to guess your boys, had mamas who loved them, protected them, and kept them safe. And that is really the core and the heart of what our kids needed.
Yes.
And we can go back later and have discussions and say, listen, I'm really sorry that I taught you this, because now I understand this.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
coming
dear.
from the opposite perspective of my ex read those books and believed that all the sex stuff from the books, and told my boys that that's just how men are. I'm coming from the opposite perspective. Like, how am I supposed to help them with this? So I pray, but yeah, I'm coming from the other end.
Well, and because I had boys, what the church then taught was that their father was to be responsible for teaching them about the fact of life.
Exactly.
And oh my gosh, if I had that to do all over again.
Right.
But you know what? Now that they're adults, there's a lot of things we can discuss.
Right.
And I'm not nearly as red-faced and embarrassed and awkward as I was 10 years ago. And I'm sure you guys, you've interviewed Sheila Ray Gregoire. I think you have, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So I cannot say enough about the Great Sex Rescue and using that as a framework for talking to young people. I really hope that she will come out with a shorter book for young people, because, most teenagers are not going to read a book that's that length.
Yeah, that would be great.
I would love to see her come out with one for just talking to your young adult, or being your teenagers, and then also like a premarital curriculum that is really the stuff we actually needed to hear when we were getting married, instead of the stuff that most of us heard. So,
I would think because she's so passionate about that she'll be in the works. But no, I made at least my older 2 listen to that pod, because I interviewed them. I'm like, you need to listen to this, and I need to have my younger one, now that he's older, listen to it too.
Yeah, it's my go-to wedding gift. If I know the bride very well, I will give that book to the bride. I am not quite brave enough if the groom is the one that I'm more familiar with. I'm not quite ready to hand it over to a young man, although it's incredibly powerful. But yes, if I am good friends with the bride, she's going to get that book as her wedding gift. So
right, especially the Christian books, because they tend to be very more powerful. But we kind of talked about this next one a little bit. What were you wearing?
Yeah, we did talk about that. So that's just not something we should ever say. What were you wearing? What did you do? What message or signal did you give off? Not acceptable. That's not a reason to abuse anyone ever.
Yeah. And then the next one is, we've talked about this before on our podcast, but you're just bitter. And then I know you had discussed that Rebecca Davis has a great video on that. And we've had her on the podcast talking about that from her first book.
Yeah.
because that was a big one for me too, where a pastor told me I was bitter and wanted me to read read about Naomi in the Bible. And she totally untwist that. And like, she was grieving and then I was grieving too. So it's so understood, but that's definitely a big one that a lot of survivors probably get told.
Yeah, I suggest that video often. And bitterness has been weaponized against hurting people and against survivors. And there is a form of bitterness that is not actually sinful. And as you just implied, it's about grieving.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so when people are saying and just throwing the word bitter out there, what they should be saying is, you are hurting.
Yeah.
You are I can see that you are really hurt.
Exactly what it is.
That would be a really healthy and helpful thing to say to someone. And I remember this is one that happened to me. I was in a small group setting. I mean, not just once, but this particular incident comes to mind. I was in a small group setting, and you know how those groups can go and people think they have like authority to speak over you. And it was someone who was considerably younger than me. And I was holding things close to my heart. This was the year that all things were brought into the open. Very few people like knew what I was going through because I wasn't really allowed to talk about it. And she just blurted out. And well, actually, I think she took me aside. And Heather, I just really feel like you're bitter and I want to pray for you. I mean, it just gutted me. She had no flipping idea what I was dealing with.
Wow.
And she thought that she had the right to speak that word over me. And so I've been twitchy over the word bitter for about 20 some years now because it was just used as a weapon. There was no compassion. There was no care. It was judgmental. Yeah. And then that bleeds into the next one where people say you are so unforgiving. And those two are weaponized horrifically. So what I recommend people do is go to jimmyhinton.org and jump on his podcast tab, and episodes 33 through 37. He does the most amazing breakdown of what biblical forgiveness actually is and what it is not.
Yes, I love that. I watched or I listened to all those podcasts too.
Oh my gosh. Like there's been something in me for so long that's been asking questions. And often people are told they must forgive and they're not even safe yet.
Right. Yeah, Sarah Dougal's podcast is on that we did with her. It's excellent.
Safety is the priority, people, not forgiveness. Like that is between her and God.
Right.
When and if she forgives, that's between her and God. But you need to help her get safe. You don't need to be beating her over the head. You haven't even acknowledged that what she's been through is horrific and abusive, and you're telling her to forgive what she can't even name.
Yeah.
Right.
Can you tell I feel passionately about this?
Well, this next one I'm reading, I'm starting to feel passionate about. Stop living in the past and stop playing the victim. I get this so much. It makes me just like, why are they saying this to me? I can't even function. You know, that's my mind. Right. Like, yeah.
Well,
to be continued. Stay tuned for next week's part 2 of What Not to Say with Heather Elizabeth. You don't want to miss it.
Thanks for tuning in to Hanging On to Hope. Check out our website, hangingontohope.org. There are resources on there, and if you would like to donate or volunteer, you can do that through our website. We are a brand new nonprofit, so we appreciate any and all support. And we thank you for listening, and until next time, keep hanging on to hope. We are evidence that there is hope and healing for you, and our passion is to help you find it too. So thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for listening, everyone.